Hello and welcome to Wednesday of Neurodiversity Celebration Week. We have already had 2 fabulous podcasts published this week, firstly with Jennifer and then with Naja. And today we are talking to Paula Prober. Paula is a psychotherapist in Oregon, USA. And before that, she was actually an educator of gifted students. But you probably know her best as the author of Your Rainforest Mind and its sequel, Journey into Your Rainforest Mind. Paula has developed this wonderful analogy of the rainforest mind to, I guess, describe a subset of the gifted population that is especially creative and complex. And I mean, I'll let Paula explain about that whole theory in the podcast. But it was a wonderful, amazing conversation. It was a real delight to meet Paula. If you haven't come across her before, she is like this very maternal, comforting voice out there in the kind of global gifted community. She has wonderful posts on Instagram that just fill you with that sense of it's all going to be okay. So I was thrilled to meet Paula and do this episode with her and talk about how this rainforest mind analogy might help you as an adult understand yourself, but also what is a multipotentialite and why we need to make time to work on ourselves as parents. So check it out. Sign up at ourgiftedkids.com so you don't miss out on anything, and we will email you when we release a podcast. And also at the moment this week, the doors are open to the Our Gifted Kids Hub, which is a community for parents of gifted kids. And you can check that out at ourgiftedkids.com/hub if that's something that interests you. So let me know, like we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we've got a Facebook group, and I would love to know if these episodes are resonating with you this week. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted. Because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I've felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. Welcome to this week's podcast. It's an absolute delight for me today to be introducing Paula Prober. And when I was thinking earlier, it's like, how do I introduce Paula Prober? It was like, it's just Paula Prober, people. It's like Paula Prober. And so if you haven't come across Paula before, she is an author. She was an educator of gifted students, and she's a counselor. But I think more than that, the role Paula plays on this kind of global giftedness community is almost this maternal matriarchal voice of you're okay, you're not broken. There's understanding and this just soothing tone of it's okay, you've just got a rainforest mind. And so it's a delight to introduce Paula today to have a chat with us about what is a rainforest mind and more. But first of all, Paula, welcome. It's a delight to have you on the podcast today.
I'm very happy to be here, Sophia. It's lovely to be here. I love talking about this. This is my favorite thing.
Excellent. Me too. And so I thought we might just start with, tell us a little bit about you and how did you kind of end up doing what you're doing?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I know. Where do you start, right?
Yeah. Well, I can sort of be a little chronological, I think. Yeah. I was in education first. When I graduated from college back in my 20s, I started as a teacher in a public school setting. And I had a couple of colleagues tell me that the way I taught would be appropriate, really great for gifted children. And I at that point was kind of like, what's a gifted child? What is that? So I learned, there was a master's degree program in education at the college nearby. So I took that, and it was in gifted education. And the people who told me that said that because I was not a traditional type teacher. I was not the center of the universe in the classroom. It was a very project-based class, and the kids were always doing different things together. And I had an independent reading program, so they weren't all reading the same book at the same time. All of those things that I just naturally did because that's how I loved teaching. And it turns out those were all good tools for the gifted kids thrived in my classroom. Some of the other kids, maybe not so much. The kids who needed more structure and more, I can't even think of what that's called, but the basics, more of the basics. I don't know that they did so well, but the gifted kids thrived. So I learned what that was, and then pretty quickly got a job teaching in a gifted program, in a pull-out program in a middle school. So I was a teacher pulling gifted kids out of the regular classroom. And that was interesting. I loved it. The kids were amazing. And the teachers were not real happy with me because they were how every teacher thinks that the kids all need to be in every session. If you miss a class, it's terrible. And anyway, it was tricky trying to work with the teachers and talk to the teachers about why these kids needed this different kind of thing. And that's when I developed the analogy, actually, of the Rainforest Mind, because I needed a way to explain giftedness to people, to teachers, and really anybody who wasn't sure, what does it mean? What's the definition? And right, there are so many different definitions, and some people think one way, some people think it's achievement, some people think it's personality or brain, or there's so many different opinions. And so I needed a simple way to explain it to teachers where they might feel more comfortable with it. And so it sort of was one of those moments where, because I really love the metaphor of all people. It's like people as ecosystems. So some people are like meadows, some people are like deserts, some people are like oceans, and some people are like the rainforest. And all those ecosystems are beautiful and valuable and important. And the rainforest ecosystem is just the most complex. And that's like our gifted people. They're full of ideas and many layers, and there's so much going on, and it's colorful and it's intense and it's highly sensitive. And it really fits that what a rainforest is like, really fits with this population. And even to the point of we misunderstand them and we try to make them into something they're not. We cut them down like we do our rainforests. And I'm pleased with how the metaphor works. And some of the teachers still weren't convinced, but it was at least a way to help them see we're not talking about better than, we're not saying that these kids are superior human beings. We're just saying they have these differences, and this is what their differences are like. And so I was in teaching then for a certain number of years, and then I was ready to get out of education, and everything I was interested in was psychotherapy oriented and mental health. And I was a client in counseling, and I loved that. And so I went back to school when I was 39 and got this counseling degree and worked in an agency for a while, and then transitioned into a private practice. And basically, it dawned on me that I should specialize in counseling gifted folks, because I knew that they had particular mental health issues that the therapists didn't understand, that many therapists would have no idea because there's no training, or there, at least then, there's very little training now, I think, too, for therapists on understanding what does anxiety look like in a gifted person, or what does depression look like. And of course, everyone's different, but there are these particular needs that the gifted population has that made it sense for me to focus on that. And then I was looking for something else interesting to do. So I started blogging, and I'm so surprised how much I love writing and blogging and having a larger influence, reaching people around the world with the blog. I just feel so privileged to be able to do that, to be able to live in the time when the technology exists so that we can reach people around the world. And so I started the blog. Then this GHF, they have a small press. they noticed my blog and asked me to write a book for them. So then I wrote my first book. And then, let's see, I'm trying to think. So then, I decided, okay, so I got people who were asking about putting the blog posts into a book for people who wanted a book in their hands. Yeah. So I took the first 4 years of the blog, the most popular posts, put them in, and that's my second book. And then I organized the posts because they're not really organized on the blog. I just write whatever I'm interested in writing that particular day. So there's perfectionism, there's sensitivities, there's loneliness, there are schooling. Those are many of the topics. So I got to put them into these chapters in the second book. And then at the end of every chapter have suggested activities that you can do, exercises you can do, mostly journaling to get more, to find out more for yourself about how you relate to these topics. Yeah. So that's book 2. And then just recently, I kind of discovered Instagram and I'm having fun doing little videos on Instagram. It's just really funny because I didn't think that I would enjoy that or that would be something I would want to do. But on Instagram, you write these memes, right? And gifted people are more complicated than a little meme, but it seems like I come up with the meme and then I can do a little video and it just feels, I don't know what it is about my personality, but I enjoy, even though I'm not talking directly to the person, I feel like I'm talking to a bunch of people and reaching people and then getting the response, the little emoji responses or the questions or the comments on Instagram. And so I've enjoyed doing that too. So that's kind of my path.
Well, I have multiple questions there, but I follow you on Instagram as well. And I really love your posts because, as I said before, it's just very soothing and comforting and seen. I think what you do is just help people feel seen, and it is really lovely. So I definitely encourage everyone to follow Paula on Instagram. But we'll take a step back there. Let's start with, so we've touched on what is a rainforest mind there in terms of the different ecosystems. And what I love about that analogy is it's easy to get caught up in the label giftedness because it's just a horrific kind of label. I think there's a lot of history and misconceptions around it and people find it really hard to resonate with that because of those misconceptions. And like you said, the million different definitions that are out there of it, it just kind of makes it hard to find what it is about that you can connect to. And what I love about the Rainforest Mind analogy is it just kind of says, right, forget all that. Let's reconnect with this wonderful metaphor from nature, which draws us back into what is those really complex ecosystems and seeing our minds as an extension of that complexity. So I think it's easier to kind of go, well, yeah, I'm complex. I can resonate to that. I can say yes to that. I might struggle with saying, yeah, I'm gifted, but I can kind of go, yeah, definitely I'm complex and I'm sensitive. And I like the way that you map out a lot of different traits and experiences in your books. And I think perhaps we can dive into maybe a few of those in this conversation. And we might start with multipotentialite versus being a specialist. Can you tell us a little bit about what a multipotentialite is?
Sure. Yeah. But I guess one point I wanted to make was that not every person who we would define as gifted is actually a rainforest mind. What I've learned as I've continued to work here in the field, it's like the rainforest minded type of gifted is the more creative, the person who's that high sensitivity, high empathy, many interests, and many career paths and wants to do many different things and learn about everything. Not all people we would define as gifted are the rainforest mind variety. So I do sort of want to differentiate that because not everyone is a multipotentialite, but they may be brilliant scientists, or mathematicians or even musicians in the one track. And that's what they do their entire lives. And they're satisfied with that. And they are high achievers. So just to clarify.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because it hadn't occurred to me that analogy might be just a subset of giftedness, perhaps because it just resonates so much. But that's really interesting. And so do you relate the Rainforest Mind analogy specifically to multipotentialite, creative kind of personalities? Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so with multipotentialite, I always give credit to Emily Wapnick. You know her, right? Wapnick, because that's her term. She came up with that. And so I use that, but I try to mention her every time it comes up because it's a lovely term. And it describes one of the traits of the rainforest minded person, which is someone who they will tell me they're interested in everything. They want to do everything. And it's so hard sometimes it's challenging to settle into a certain career path because they feel like they have to give up all these other ones to do this one. And so then I talk to them about, you don't have to do the same thing. Once you decide to do this one thing, you don't have to do that the rest of your life. You can do it for a while and then go to the next thing and the next thing. And I have a client who she stays in a job maybe for 2 years and then is ready to go to something else. And not everybody can do that. But the multipotentialite gifted person is highly creative. And so it's just, they have so many interests and abilities, so many things that they are capable of doing. So how do you decide? How do you choose? And they're big thinkers, and it's you think about all the variables and all the complexities and all the variables within the variables. It's like, so that's, where I come in. It's I help normalize that in a way, right? Because not everyone is like that.
Yeah.
Some people, I knew someone she was a first grade teacher for 30 years and she loved it and she was good at it, but that was what she did her entire career life. And multipotentialite would just die doing the same thing. Although teaching can have a lot of variety in it. And so it can attract some of these people. They can go into teaching because if they get freedom to do many things, depending on the school system and the grade level and all of that. But certainly when I was a teacher of the gifted, I could write my own curriculum. I could do whatever I wanted with them. There were no rules. And so that was very stimulating. And then being with all these kids who were so funny, their sense of humor was so interesting. So anyway, I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's like you say, it's really important to understand, because when I first came across the term multipotentialite, I recall, I think I was unwell. I had a virus. I remember just laying on the couch watching TED Talks on my phone, as you do. And I stumbled across a TED Talk on multipotentialite. And I was like, wow, because I'd always gone through life feeling kind of inadequate because I didn't have a thing. And I always just wish when someone says, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I hate that question. And I always just wish I could just say, look, I'm an accountant, or I'm a teacher, or I am a something. But my response was always like, well, I always kind of had these different paths and different kinds of jobs. And I felt very much like a jack of all trades, kind of master of none. And so when I came across that term and multipotentialite or generalist, it helped me make sense of where I kind of fit in the world. And also the sense that actually brings value in itself, having different interests and different abilities. And so I think it's a really important notion for multipotentialites to understand. It's kind of like you're not broken because you're not just doing the one thing your whole career. It's just kind of like you have different abilities and and different, interests. And man, I've just got a list as long as my arm of the things I've considered doing and being, and even some of the different things that I've done. And it's taken a long time to go, well, that's okay, that's me. And what I bring to things is actually a really diverse set of interests, knowledge, and abilities. And that's a real strength. So yeah, like my undergrad is in visual arts, but my best subject at school was science. But I remember being 15 and looking at this picture of an eagle and just kind of going, yeah, I can draw that. And I drew it. And that was it. I was then considered the art kid. And I, quite an aptitude for it. I won an award. I did the degree. But actually, I wanted to be a vet, or like a biologist or a marine biologist, except I don't like swimming in the ocean. So that was a problem. But what I did instead initially was a TAFE course and became a chef. And then I started studying literature and Japanese, got sick. Then I did the undergrad in visual arts, but actually I got involved in politics while I was there. Spent the next decade in politics as a policy advisor for a state minister and a campaigner, even like here in Australia and the UK. And then I kind of got back to the arts as a program manager for this amazing social enterprise in Scotland, where we worked with vulnerable young kids and we used the arts to get them out of bed in the morning. Came back to Australia and I was a development manager for a chamber music festival. Then I had kids, lost my way a bit. That was a bit challenging in terms of I did become a stay-at-home mum, which I never thought I would have the opportunity to do. And that was great, but it was also really hard. And then as I've kind of tried to figure out what to do next, I find myself doing a podcast on giftedness and diving into like psychology and things like that. So I guess if you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, that sounds like my career, dive into Multipotentialites, pick up Paula's book and explore that a bit, because this apparently is not unusual. This is a Rainforest Mind. But I think a big question when we don't understand something, we can often feel like we don't fit, like we're broken, when we don't kind of perceive ourselves fitting into what would be considered normal. What I want to ask you is, well, what are the dangers of pathologizing that experience of being a rainforest mind or gifted? Because it's something that you touch on in the book. And I think it's a really interesting conversation, because it's kind of like, I felt like with my career, it's kind of like, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just pick one thing and be this? Or people might feel like, well, why am I so sensitive? I must be broken. Why am I so intense? I must be broken. So we don't actually have to look at it that way, do we? There's other ways of looking at that Definitely. Complexity.
Yes. And that sort of feels like that's my job. That I'm called to be. I was talking with somebody today about that I love what I do. And she was saying it's not just a career, it's a calling. I feel like this is what I'm here to do, to help gifted people understand who they are and love who they are. And because they often don't fit in, often pathologize themselves or think something's wrong with them. Because even in communication, they're often they can be not understood. They're trying to explain something, but they see it in so many dimensions and so much nuance, and they're excited about it and explaining whatever it is to someone, and the other person doesn't get it, or the other person simplifies it or narrows it down or sees one thread. And you are presenting 10 threads and they can see one. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that their capacity is more limited. And there's nothing wrong with you. And even there's nothing wrong with your ability to communicate. It's that you are, the other person can't receive the complexity of what you are seeing and understanding and trying to explain. And so there's so many things like that where I can help the rainforest-minded person see their traits so that, oh, this is just being a rainforest mind. This is not an illness, or you're not diagnosable, or it's not a pathology. It's a way of being. It's a wonderful way of being. And it's unusual still on the planet, and it's hard to find others like you. And so that can be sad and lonely and frustrating. And the gifted person is often highly sensitive and has a lot of empathy. And so they're inclined to blame themselves. At least that's what I see in the people that I work with, right? There's less of that's that person's fault. It's more, I get so many clients, they're just examining themselves. What did I do? And what did I do wrong? And how? It's like, oh no, it's just that you have a rainforest mind. And so, yeah, a lot of what I do is just normalize, just explain what that is. And help people go, because I see it on my blog too. It's there in the comments. People are just saying, oh, it's just such a relief. What you're saying is just such a relief for me to know that, oh, you mean there's nothing wrong with me? I'm not even actually a bad communicator. It's just that people can't receive it because it's more complicated than they understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So perhaps what are some of the key traits of a rainforest mind? Maybe we can dig in a little bit there. And you've mentioned a few, sensitivities and intensity and creativity.
Yes. Empathy is very common. The multipotentiality and just big intellect, just very intelligent. It's sort of like I tell people that all rainforest minded folks are gifted, but not all gifted folks have rainforest minds. It's not a trait, but it's an issue often for gifted people. There's difficulty with school. There's a love of learning. There's a passion for learning about everything. But schooling can be difficult. Schooling can be problematic if they already know the material. They're 2 years or so above grade level, and they're in first grade and they're already reading. And the teacher is teaching letters because that's what most of the kids need. And this 6-year-old is reading Charlotte's Web, or Harry Potter. And so there can be schooling. Well, I work with the adults. I don't work with the kids. And so I can hear stories about bullying in school and being so bored in school, or just feeling out of place and feeling like they don't fit in. So I write, so those are the chapters kind of in my book: sensitivity and empathy and schooling and loneliness, the trouble, the difficulty finding peers, finding other rainforest minded folks to have friends, trouble with friendships and sometimes in partnerships because of the intensity, because of the drive to learn. Often there's a social conscience where there's a social sense of social responsibility, being aware of what's happening on the planet and wanting to make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. And how integral is creativity to that profile?
It's part of it.
Yeah.
Like being a divergent thinker. It doesn't necessarily, right? It's not necessarily just artistic, right? We sometimes say creative means you are able to draw, or you are a composer or musical, or it can be that, but it can also be how you think and problem solve. You love problem solving, and you don't fit in the box. You're an out of the box thinker. You're a divergent thinker.
Yeah.
So that fits with the rainforest mind, not necessarily the gifted, all the gifted, but many gifted people too are creative.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mentioned before I did an undergrad in fine arts, but then I went and worked in politics. And I had a colleague who used to say I had a paper mache degree, which is obviously really kind of nasty. And so I kind of went, oh, what's the most opposite thing that I can think of? So I did an MBA, just kind of just to balance out the visual arts, right? I thought no one's going to take me seriously, obviously, unless I do something bland. But what I realized in that phase of my career was what the arts gave me, and what the creativity gave me, was actually my strength, because I've always been a great problem solver. And I realized even then I was a great problem solver because of my creativity. And so that paper mache degree as such had helped me hone that creativity, but was the basis for which, very much my strength in that role and in that kind of part of my career, my whole life, definitely. But it's that link between understanding that creativity is not just drawing or painting. It's actually a way of thinking and participating and having that sense of depth. And there's a lot of references in your book to like a real intense sensitivity. And I'm the kind of person who will cry watching a TV ad. I'll be like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Or watching, cartoon movies with the kids. And I'll be like, oh, that's just so beautiful. So, and I've learned just to roll with that, because it's like, well, these are beautiful things and I don't care. But that can be quite hard to, assimilate and confront as an individual, to kind of go, actually, well, I'm not too sensitive. I am just sensitive. And there's a lovely quote actually in the book, which I really loved, was about one of the stories that you were telling. And she was always told that she was too much. She was too deep and too intense. And it was kind of relating herself to the ocean. And she was like, well, the ocean is also deep, but how could the ocean ever be too much? And I really loved the way that the analogy of the rainforest mind keeps bringing us back to that connection with the earth and our place within it, to kind of make sense of ourselves, because I think we can get very cerebral and sort of in our heads and forget that we're actually very connected. And I think, like all of nature, an extension of that as well.
What that makes me think of too is that so many of my clients go to nature to feel centered and calm their nervous system. And actually, there's a spiritual component for many of them connecting to nature. And that, I guess, is another trait, the intuitive and spiritual. And spirituality is such a broad topic, but there is definitely some kind of, and it's usually not within a particular form of a religion or a dogma, but it's more open-ended, spirit, love in the universe, that sort of thing. And it often comes through the connection to nature, at least in the clients that I see. And I tell those clients, it's not you're too sensitive, it's that you're highly sensitive, right?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. And that the challenge is living in this world as that person. And what are the strategies you use to, on the one hand, calm your nervous system, relaxation tools and techniques, respect yourself and what your limits are, and setting boundaries, and not necessarily spending time with people who tend to be toxic, let's say, and how do you nourish that sensitivity. And also, I guess I would say, like, use body somatic tools to help, whether it's even breathing and meditation and exercise and knowing what your hormones are and what are you eating. It can be sensitive on those levels of food sensitivities and chemical sensitivities and allergies. And so there are a whole lot of, it's really important to look at that issue and really take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been a big thing for me as well. Certainly getting back into the body and learning, well, actually, how do I feel in this moment? How can I ground myself and just breathe? And I think that's definitely a tool we need as parents in that kind of what can be very intense with our intense, gifted, complex children, is just actually learning to breathe. But what advice might you have for like an adult with a gifted child who at the moment is kind of going, well, my child is gifted and my child is neurodivergent, but is starting to realize as they learn more about what that is, actually that's sort of starting to resonate with me a little bit, but I really don't like this gifted term. Because a big part of doing this series and diving into these topics, but as an adult was my experience last year of being diagnosed gifted and autistic, which was quite unexpected. And so I guess I just wanted to provide people with some ideas of what is the next step in exploring that, if I think that some of those traits I see in myself as well.
Well, I think one of the first things is to understand that your child needs you to work on yourself, that taking time for yourself will only benefit your children. And I granted, it's hard to find that time. It's hard to make that time when you have kids, but it not only helps you be more patient with your children, right? And have more energy for them. It's essential that you model self-care and self-understanding. And one thing that can happen is you get triggered by whatever your child is doing. If you are you're unconscious of your own past, let's say your own family, even family of origin, and what happened to you as a child when you were being raised by your parents, and your child is maybe the same age as you were when you had this terrible experience growing up yourself, this can create triggering, and you can get angry and you don't understand why you're so angry because this child hasn't really done anything terrible. And it's like, the more you are aware of your own issues and your own giftedness and what that means, the better parent you are. And so, and it's not easy to look at that. And doesn't mean you all need therapy necessarily, but, and you know, parents can start with the books. Start with my blog. You start with the blog and then the books, and the key thing I think is to recognize that you have a right to take care of yourself. And it's a big gift that you give your kids. Because you heal whatever wounding you have, you understand yourself, you're more apt to understand your kids. When you get centered, you know how to calm yourself, and then you model that. That's the other thing. You model that. You make a mistake and you don't go into a whole self-deprecating tirade on yourself because you weren't the perfect parent. You learn how to take care of yourself that's the other, I guess, trait, right, of gifted people. The perfectionism is a big one that we didn't mention yet. Right. So that's a thing. And if you haven't grappled with your own perfectionism and something happens where you, of course, make a mistake as a parent, you show your child how to apologize when you make a mistake, what to do when you mess up, so that they have permission to not be perfect, and you model that skill for them. So there are a whole lot of good reasons why you as a parent should take breaks from your kids and really understand what it means for you, because it seems to be genetic. It seems to be that if you have a gifted child, the odds are fairly good that you will also be gifted, have a Rainforest Mind. So that's, I guess, the big piece that I can tell parents.
Yeah. And I have to say, any of the big parenting breakthroughs that I've had are because something in me has shifted. It's actually had nothing to do with the kids. It's kind of like my perspective changed, my insight or mindset changed, and that created the breakthrough, and nothing the kids did. And so, yeah, certainly in my experience, the best thing I can do is deal with my stuff and grow and work on me, because then I become a better parent. And it's not that my kids change or even need to change. I get better at understanding their needs and understanding them and being there for them and in better and better ways. And so yeah, I can't agree enough. That's certainly been a huge thing. And even in the last 12 months, as a family, we've been diving into really trying to understand all of our sensory issues. And between all of this, there's a menagerie of sound, a few of us crazy, and textures and sensory seeking, and there's just and it's even just getting a meal. You've got to consider everyone's sensory and textural kind of things. But kind of getting real with myself and starting to understand myself is actually giving me a language that's helped me relate to my kids. And I can kind of say, well, sometimes I now kind of recognize sometimes I get overwhelmed, sensory overwhelm. And previously I didn't have a language for that. I just called it life overwhelm, or I'm just tired, I'm just overwhelmed. But now I know sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I'm like totally knackered. Sometimes I am overwhelmed with life, and sometimes I am overwhelmed like in my senses, and it's almost like a progression. They do build on each other, but now I know, well, if I feel that way, this is what I do. If I feel that way, this is what I do. And it's given me a language as well, so I can say to my kids, oh, do you ever feel this way? Oh, yeah, all the time. Like, oh, okay, my goodness. Well, let's see what we can do about that, right? And it's a really powerful thing. And I think that's probably the one thing that I wanted to share out of all this, is that it's totally worth, in my opinion, taking the time and energy to do this work. And it does take time and energy and sometimes money, but what you get out of it can be so great for yourself and just as a language with your kids as well, that understanding. So huge benefit there, I think, in exploring all these things. I was interested, we were exchanging a few emails, and you had asked whether or not that diagnosis resonated for me. And I was interested in that inquiry, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure. Well, so some background. I don't work with many twice exceptional clients. Most of the clients that I have are kind of like straight up Rainforest Mind without the complexity of the twice or thrice exceptionality. And so we haven't really talked about that.
Yeah.
But that's not my field. So I'm glad you didn't ask me questions about that because, I refer people to, who are looking at autism spectrum or ADHD or dyslexia, some of those other issues, exceptionalities.
Yeah.
So, but I think why I asked was I think that it depends on the evaluator. How you want to really get a good evaluator. You want to get someone who understands all of this, giftedness and these other traits, who really knows it well, because gifted people can be misdiagnosed. And they can like even these sensory issues that you and your kids have, that can absolutely look like autism or autism spectrum when it may not be. It might be, but it isn't necessarily. And the creative mind and the divergent thinking can be misdiagnosed ADHD. And because I have seen that, right? You have so many interests, you have so many things you want to do, and you go, you're a random thinker. You're not a linear sequential thinker. So when you're random, it looks like ADHD. And again, it might be, but it isn't necessarily. So I think I just was curious to see, did you get a good evaluator so that you can count on that as being a true diagnosis?
Yeah. And I think that is really important because, like you say, the impact of giftedness on all these things. And even before, like my experience last year, I was grappling to understand the line between autism and profoundly gifted, which I was feeling like was something coming up with one of my kids, because like you say, the trait can be so similar, and it's kind of understanding where that comes from. And even now, as I'm still processing my whole assessment experience, which was very thorough. And in my first appointment with the psychologist, she was like, well, you can self-diagnose. And I was like, no, I need data. I need this to be rigorous. I need to know that, like, I need the examination and the data to feel confident in this process, which in itself probably says a lot. But even now I kind of will be like, really? Is this? And I kind of go, well, I did the whole thing. It was, and like, yes, those things certainly. And even like getting the written report at that point, even though I was kind of like, yeah, this matches my experience, it was still a shock to see that I ticked all the boxes, because I thought, well, maybe it'd just be a little bit, like I was still grappling. But I just think it's undeniable how much crossover there is. And I wonder, on this journey of exploring neurodivergence, if we don't get to some point in the future where it's just kind of, I don't know, you're neurodivergent or you're not. And your neurodivergence is just expressed in these ways. Whereas at the moment, we've still got different labels. Because what started me off was thinking I was ADHD. And even sometimes I'm like, should I get that looked at? I don't know. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think it's just ASD. But yeah, so I guess what I'm just saying is it's really complex. And it's kind of, I don't know, I think very much worth exploring. But if you try and have lines that are too rigid, I don't know, I feel like I would break if I had to have very rigid lines around my understanding and of that, if that makes sense. I'm happy for just to feel like there's a bit of grayness around that, but then I tend to be a very grey person. So maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just waffling there. But yeah, in summary, yeah, it's really complicated, isn't it? These brains.
It is quite complicated. Yes. Yeah, especially I think, well, I don't know, for women with the autism spectrum diagnosis, I think it's much harder to see. Again, I'm not studied in that field, but I know a young man who's I'm friends with his mom, and she talks about his characteristics kind of like pretty clear.
Yeah.
But I had a young woman client who diagnosed herself as on the spectrum, and I never saw it. Because and some of it is that masking that girls learn to mask the social skills issues and that sort of thing. And so I'm just a beginner in that field, but she educated me, and that's sometimes gifted. I mean, that's kind of a trait. Sadly, if you have a Rainforest Mind, if you're a gifted person and you're working with a practitioner, sometimes you educate them. I even had clients who diagnosed themselves with a physical ailment when their physicians couldn't figure it out. They figured it out. That's a whole other discussion, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. And I was lucky to have a neurodivergent assessor. So very much understood, because I've had therapy on and off throughout my whole life, and it's certainly never been picked up before. And there's one assessment you do, which is about masking. And I just remember filling that out. It's only a short kind of questionnaire, but like I would have been like a 9 or 10 on everything. And I marked myself a bit lower on some of them because I'm like, I can't kind of just tick all the top boxes. But every line, I was like, what do you mean everyone doesn't do this? And as I filled them out, I'm like, what do you mean everyone doesn't do this? How is this a questionnaire? Doesn't everyone do this? So it is. Yeah, it is really interesting. And like you, I'm still very much learning about autism spectrum and sort of interacts with giftedness. And it is very complicated, and just really speaking only from my own experience about those things. But getting back to the Rainforest Mind a bit as we come to the end of our conversation, I think I'd be remiss not to ask, like, over the last sort of your experience as a teacher and then coming through counselling, you've been in this gifted community for a while, if that's okay to say, and it'd be interesting to see if you've seen changes, or have things stayed fairly stagnant, or have you seen shifts over that time just in the community or understanding of it?
Yes and no. Okay. So in schooling, sadly, I don't see a lot of change.
Yeah.
It's been years. And back when I was working with educators, I would do, workshops for educators on how to work with gifted kids in the regular classroom. And there's just a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of resistance that I still see. today. I still hear people talking about the same things we talked about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So in schooling, sadly, I haven't seen a lot of growth. In the field, in gifted education, I think there is change and growth. And I think with this whole the finding of the word neurodiversity, that's pretty new in the field. And the understanding of twice exceptionality, and the practitioners, more and more practitioners who understand that, and who now with the technology and with the internet, that parents can find so much more information. And the GHF learners and the parenting gifted children and your podcast. I mean, there's a lot of access to information that there never was years ago. So that the growth of the internet and social media has been a big advantage for parents and practitioners, and parents finding practitioners, and practitioners getting the information out, and more books. There are more books for parents on raising gifted kids, for sure. Yeah. So that has been a big change that I've seen.
Yeah, so some good things there, but that's really interesting what you say about education, and incredibly sad to see that we haven't had any big shifts there. But I have to say that doesn't feel surprising that that's your experience. But
I was just going to say, that is just my experience. Yeah. So it could be different. Yeah. I just haven't seen it. And granted, just the disclaimer that teaching is really hard, and schools are under so much pressure. I mean, with COVID, and it's just surviving as a teacher is challenging. So there's all of that needs to be said. It's a hard job.
Absolutely. It's really hard, and we're still not adequately preparing our teachers to identify gifted kids, or how to sort of educate them best is certainly, I think, a fair statement. Even here in Australia, we've done numerous Senate inquiries over the last 20 years, and they've all come back with the same kind of comments about the lack of servicing. And I really don't think that we have shifted a great deal. There's policies do come and go, but I guess the word on the street is, they're not always as effective. Yeah. But anyway, I think teachers do such an amazing job, and it's a really hard job. It's very undervalued and undersupported, and maybe it's definitely part of the problem, but certainly a part of the shift perhaps that we need before gifted kids will kind of get the real support they need. But like you say, there's a lot of teachers and schools out there doing their best to try and meet the needs of these kids, and we certainly talk about those on the podcast as well. So it's definitely, while I think we acknowledge the challenges, we're not intending to give teachers a hard time either. We know it's really challenging. It's systemic. It's a systemic issue.
We need to overhaul our whole education system for all kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's really interesting. But like you say, even in the last sort of 5 years or so that I've been on this journey, it's like there's so much more around today than there was even 5 years ago. So in terms of information out there for parents and books, and it's really exciting that I get to talk to quite a few authors like yourself on the podcast and share some of those amazing books with parents and help connect parents a bit more quickly to sort of resources and professionals out there that can help on the journey. So anyone listening today who would like to keep in touch with you, how can they follow what you're doing?
Probably the best place would be signing up for my blog, so that you get it. There's a sign up thing on the whatever, however you call it, on the first page, where you can get the blog in your email. So becoming part of the blog, and then probably Instagram, following me on Instagram, Paula Prober. I think you can just type in my name and find me on Instagram. So those are probably the two best places. And then my books would be on going to your independent bookstore to get the books, or your library, the best places to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the first book was Your Rainforest Mind, and you got them there. And the second one was Journey to Your Rainforest Mind. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Those are the two titles. And the first one, I described the second one, but the first one is the more in-depth look at giftedness and a lot of case studies of clients that I've worked with and lots of resources recommended. Yeah. And it's more complex than the second book, which is funnier and more lighthearted. So in a way, I tell people, use the second book to introduce the topic to people who don't quite understand it. And you read the first book for those of you who are already into it and are really looking for more in-depth information. I had a client the other day tell me she read my book twice. She read it through twice. And I was just so, I've heard that from other people. They read it more than once. And it makes me so happy because I intentionally made it dense, because I know as a gifted person, right, you read a self-help book and they say the same thing over and over and over again. And it's like, why read this? So you read the first chapter and you're done because you already know what it's going to say. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure my book was like, full of information. And it always pleases me when somebody tells me, yeah, your book is all dog-eared and I have marked all these places up and I read it a few times. And so that's just to describe the first book.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many times my husband has said to me, oh, how was that book? And I'm like, yeah, it should have been a pamphlet, like they should have just said that in like 5 pages. It's a glorified article. But I have to say, your book is meaty. And after each chapter, there's a lot of really great resources, which is always great because then you get to dig deeper, right? Which who doesn't love that? And just the topics. And I think the case studies, what I certainly try to do with the podcast is provide that opportunity for people to see themselves in other people's stories. And I think it's really great for that as well. And I know in having another look at it before meeting up, I was like getting teary at bits where I was like, oh, I've got work to do there because that's really hitting me. And it's just nice to find that connection in other stories that kind of mirror parts of yourself. So highly recommend it as a way of kind of going, well, I think I might be a Rainforest Mind. What do I do now? Like Paula said, check out the blogs, which are great, and on her website. And we'll put the website in the show notes. But what's your website?
Rainforestmind.com.
Nice and easy to remember, rainforestmind.com. And Paula Prober on Instagram. And that's well worth a follow because you get these lovely posts that are really just affirming and fabulous. So, Paula, it was absolute delight to meet you today. Thank you so much for making time for this conversation. And thank you. It's just been really lovely to catch up and have a good chat about everything.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.